Okay, members of council, we do have quorum. This meeting is now resumed. I will now take the release of member holds. Councillor Carmichael Greb.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On page 11, CC 38.6, 250 Lawrence Avenue West and 219 Glengarry Avenue. OMB appeal.
So on page 11, CC 38.6, you're releasing?
Yes.
Okay.
With a confidential motion that was circulated that needs.
Yes.
And in
That was an advanced circulation. Yes. Okay. On favor? Carried. Councillor Fletcher. Oh, sorry. Item is amended. On favor? Carried. Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, Speaker. On page 5, ED 27.8, Film Studio Infrastructure Study. Like a recorded vote.
Nice, Paul.
On page 5, ED 27.8, Councillor Fletcher is releasing. Recorded vote.
Councillor Fletcher, please.
Councillor Karygiannis. Councillor DeGiorgio. Councillor McMahon, your vote, please. Oh, we have enough.
The item is adopted unanimously, 30 in favor.
Councillor Shiner.
More, Speaker.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you so much. Page 6, 27, PG 27.3, 21 Don Valley, etc., etc. I will release that.
On page 6, PG 27.3.
Yes.
Councillor Fletcher is releasing. On favor? Carried. Recorded. This is on page 6, PG 27.3, 21 Don Valley, 30 Booth Avenue, 375, 385 Eastern Avenue.
The item is adopted unanimously, 32 in favor.
Did you have another one, Councillor Fletcher?
Yes, Speaker. Page 11, CC 38.1, suitability of identified property as a proposed shelter. And there's a motion that I have to, pardon me? They're looking for that motion, sorry. To refer that to CDR. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, this is on page 11, CC 38.1. For a motion is on the screen. Recorded vote.
Counselor Perruzza, Counselor DeGiorgio, Counselor Wong Tam, Counselor Thompson, please.
The referral carries unanimously, 33 in favor.
Councillor Shiner.
Madam Speaker, MM 38.23, request for deadline extension of Toronto Local Appeal Body Rules. The clerk has, it's not, it was one that was circulated to you.
There is no page. It was introduced before our break, and you just received it on your desk. It's the orange.
So it is simply.
Okay.
Simply.
We're holding it down, Councillor Shiner. Councillor Shan.
Madam Speaker, can I finish speaking?
Yes,
Really?
Councillor Shiner?
Thank you. I would just ask my colleagues to look at it if they could tonight, as the clerk has brought it to my attention that to be on the agenda for the Planning and Growth Committee, we have to deal with it today. Thank you.
Councillor Shan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have two items to release. Page 5, ED 27.4, appointment to Business Improvement Area Boards of Management. I would like to release that, talk to the staff as well.
On page 5, ED 27.4, Councillor Shan is releasing. On favor? Carried. Yes, Councillor Shan?
Next item is same page, page 5, 27.5, the City of Toronto, Canada 150 celebration.
Okay, and you're releasing that?
Yes.
Okay, on page 5, ED 27.5, Councillor Shan is releasing. Recorded vote.
Counselor Perruzza, please. Counselor McMahon. Counselor Davis, thank you.
The item is adopted unanimously, 34 in favor.
Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On page 6, Government Management Committee 25.10, Union Station Revitalization Project, I can release that.
On page 6, GM 25.10, Councillor Ainsley is releasing. Recorded vote.
Councillor Carmichael Greb, please. Councillor Pasternak. Councillor Karygiannis, please.
Councillor DeBaremaker, please. Councillor Crisanti, when you're seated, please. Councillor Crisanti, please.
The item is adopted. The vote is 31 to 5.
Councillor Palacio.
Thanks, Speaker. Page 7, Public Works 25.5, the school bus loading zone, Winona Drive, Ward 1721. I have a technical amendment that has been asked by city staff to bring it forward. And it should be Winona Drive as opposed to Benson Avenue.
On page 7, PW 27.5, school bus loading zone, Winona Drive. Okay, amendments on the screen, all in favor? Carried. Item is amended, all in favor? Carried. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Speaker. On page 9, SC 2812, heavy vehicle prohibition, Pharmacy Avenue between Ellesmere and Eglinton Avenue. I've had my questions answered by the General Manager and her team. I want to thank her and her team, and I can release this with a recorded vote, please.
Okay. On page 9, SC 28.12, at the top of the page, Councillor Thompson is releasing, recorded vote. Yes, Councillor Grimes has an interest in it.
Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor DeGiorgio. Councillor Wong Tam.
Councillor Fragedakis, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 36 in favor.
Councillor Matlow.
Madam Speaker, on page 12, CC 38.9, Midtown and Focus Parks, Open Space and Streetscape Plan, request for directions regarding an OMB appeal. I've spoken with my colleagues. I know that they're in support of the redrafted wording, along with the chair of the committee, and I'm happy to release it. Also, by the way, I want to thank our planning staff and our legal staff for the very good work that they did to make sure that school grounds are better protected.
Okay. On page 12, CC 38.9, Councillor Matlow.
Thank you.
Councillor Matlow is releasing, recorded vote.
Councillor Karygiannis, please. Councillor Perruzza. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Grimes, please.
Councillor Davis, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 35 in favor.
Councillor Grimes, you have a motion you'd like to introduce?
Yes, Madam Speaker, and you have my only copy. The motion is urgent. It is required to correct an error pertaining to Council's intention to designate for the property at 68 Daisy Avenue as required by the Ontario Municipal Board settlement.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. On page 3, EX 32.8, Councillor Thompson. Questions to staff? Questions to staff?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through you to staff, I have actually had a chance to read the report EX 18.15 from 2016, and it talks a little bit about this particular matter that we're dealing with here today. But can you tell me how this relates to cap and trade, please?
How it relates to cap and trade?
Yes.
Well, the province, let me back up. So this initiative is part of the Transform TO initiative approved by Council in July of last year. There is agreement currently between all three levels of government, the province, the federal government, and ourselves. Last year, the province instituted cap and trade, which creates the opportunity to shift dollars that they collect towards these sorts of initiatives.
Right.
So we have made application to the province for support for up to 29 projects. 4 of those would be low-carbon thermal networks.
Right. Okay. And so as part of this particular process, you have identified a company to partner with in order to engage in this process? And what was a process in terms of identifying or selecting the company, which is Enwave? Is that correct?
It is Enwave.
Yes.
So what we did is we realized at the outset that there was a lot of opportunity here and that there would be a number of these projects likely contemplated simultaneously, and we didn't have the capability within the city to manage all of that ourselves. So we instituted a three-part process. The first part basically was a call for pre-qualification. We put the documentation on Merck's. It went across the globe. We got over 100 packages purchased as part of that, and we got 12 proposals.
Okay.
We had a team of internal and external people on the team, reviewed the 12. We narrowed it down to 5, and we invited those 5 to provide a response to a request, an expression of interest, a pre-qualification, not a pre-qualification, a request, yeah, an RFP. That's what I'm trying to get to. The RFP resulted in 3 bids. Again, we went through them, and the best bid by far was Enwave. So we moved on to the next phase, which was the negotiation of an agreement that would allow us to co-develop these low-carbon thermal network opportunities. And that's where we are now. And the report in front of you for consideration today basically requests Council's approval to basically negotiate the agreement with Enwave to execute the agreement.
At this particular point in time, we don't know what our costs in will be at this point?
That will be determined on a project-by-project basis.
Okay.
And we recognize the ability to invest or contribute assets in several ways. We have the opportunity to provide access to property and buildings, facilities. We have the opportunity to provide access to the thermal resource that lies beneath parks and potentially in the energy contained in sewers, and also if we see the opportunity to invest recoverable debt.
So there will be a formal a company established, a corporation will be established that will be owned by the city and Enwave? Very similar to the previous
completely
Enwave?
Different from the previous model.
It's different?
It's completely different than the prior model. The prior model, we were able...
I'm just having a hard time hearing you, so I'm kind of leaning closer.
So the prior model existed pre-CODA.
Right.
And there was a special agreement for that. Under CODA, we cannot hold a joint interest in a private sector corporation. So that model is no longer available to us. So basically what we need is, the governance model would use Create TO, Build Toronto, to hold our interests in these partnerships, these limited partnerships as they develop projects. So each project would be considered separate from each other, and at that time, when they're considered, the financial contributions, the assets that we contribute, would be contained in the business case, which we would bring to council for approval.
Okay, so the last time we had an arrangement with Enwave, we had some issues with respect to what I thought was pretty problematic for this council, was the cash call. Will we see that situation as it relates to this arrangement and these different entities that we will be involved with?
No, at this point in time, we have not set up the arrangement between the two organizations that way.
Will it be set up that way?
I don't believe so. That's not the intent now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. No? No speakers? Okay, on the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
Councillor Fragadakis, please, and Councillor Crisanti.
The item is adopted unanimously, 36 in favor.
Page 4, EX 32.19, City Planning 2018 Rental Housing Market Conditions in Toronto. Councillor Matlow, questions to staff? No? Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, fine.
We're at EX 32.19. No questions? Councillor Matlow to speak.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of our Tenants Issues Committee, we've had a very heavy agenda. You remember last year we championed a rent safe to make sure that renters across our city had better protections within their homes when their buildings weren't maintained properly. One of the things, though, that we hear consistently from tenants from across the city, from North York to Scarborough to Etobicoke to downtown and in between, is that the city has become unaffordable. Incredibly unaffordable. And I'm talking about seniors who are receiving a surprise Aggie and forced out of their homes and out of their communities. And I've heard stories directly about them who feel isolated and feel lonely because they have to leave their home and they have to go to another neighborhood where they can afford a unit. We have heard from so many youth who not only are struggling to make their rent here in Toronto, but many stories of youth who are choosing to live outside of Toronto because they can't afford to live inside the city. Not only does that impact their quality of life, but also impacts their commute time. And then, of course, there's cyclical effects because it increases traffic congestion, the gridlock that we experience, and the congestion on our transit system. All in all, we need to do whatever we can to make this city more affordable for renters and for us all. So our committee has asked staff to do a number of things. Number one, work in an interdivisional way to recommend evidence-based ways to contribute to the solution. It's not going to be an overnight solution. There's no magic bullet. But if there are meaningful things that the city can do to contribute to finding an answer, along with the other orders of government, we need to do our part. And we need to use every means we have to make this city more affordable for renters. Number two, we're asking staff to look into a number of good ideas that have been brought forward, such as what Councillor Bylaw has championed, which is looking at laneway housing. Is this something that will contribute to our long-term goal to make more housing available and bring down prices? And also the question of buildings, small buildings, house forms sometimes, that have fewer than 6 units, that have no protections. In fact, we don't even have a rental replacement policy to respond to when we lose a house form or a small building with 6 units, and those tenants have no protections. We're looking at this in a holistic, comprehensive way. And I can tell you that as chair of the Tenant Issues Committee, I've worked with a team of councillors on that committee who have been incredibly committed to advocating for tenants across the city. And we team up and we work very closely with Councillor Bylaw and her Affordable Housing Committee to make sure that we are working in a way that doesn't repeat unnecessarily or do redundant work, but make sure that we're working in a cohesive way, that we co-champion this initiative together as committees on behalf of City Council. You know, over the past 16 years, just as a reality check for ourselves, the vacancy rate has never been so low, and the rents haven't been this high in the last 15, 16 years. Think about that. In the past 15, 16 years, the vacancy rates have not been this low, and the rents have not been this high. The city is not affordable. So we can debate all sorts of things. And we can have differences of opinion on a number of things. We do. That's healthy. That's democracy. It would be a shame if we didn't. But I know that one thing we all agree on is that we want this city to be affordable and accessible and inclusive for every single resident who lives here today, but also wants to live here. And currently, I know each one of us here from renters and residents across the city that it's unaffordable. They're struggling. They want us to do what we can. And what we do at our committee, just for your information, where we can make substantive differences, such as on rent safe and the bylaws that we can affect change with, and like what we've asked staff to do now, we do. Where we can advocate towards the Ontario government or elsewhere to demand change, such as reforms on the way that above the guideline rent increases are allowed, we do. So in other words, we do what we can substantively here on this level, but we also advocate towards other orders of government. So I hope that you support this initiative. I look forward to this all coming back, again, comprehensively, so we can review a number of professionally advised options on how best we as councillors can go to bat for renters and then work together on those solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll to speak.
Just briefly, Madam Speaker, I'm not going to move a motion, but I will say this, particularly for my colleague, Councillor Matlow, because a trend is emerging of infill on multi-residential towers in the park properties. And we know that it will become more and more a trend given not only some of our tower in the park policies, but I think it will actually play out in the new inclusionary zoning formulas. And the reason I mention it is the one thing that's missing here, and it's a legislative piece that's going to take both houses of government working on it. But one thing that is missing there is when someone comes forward with a tower in the park that they've owned for umpteen decades. I think there's some, Madam Speaker, in your own ward, where they've owned it for decades. It's free and clear they own it. It's pure profit every month. And when they come forward to apply to put 22 stories, I now have 3 applying to put 33 stories, 39 stories in the back parking lot of that building. We may well have to consider it, but right now, there is no legislative requirement, no Planning Act provision that allows us to say, not until you start treating the tenants in your existing building decently. Fix one bathtub, replace a few stoves, fix some moldy fridges, and then come back and talk to me about your application. We actually don't have the legislative or regulatory oomph to do that. We try, we have pleasant conversations, but it is the only thing missing here. And I just want to caution you, it's already happening in multiple sites in my area, driven by the precedent in Parkway Forest. And it is a solution to start putting some development into those areas around towers in the park. You might not think it, but it actually does give you a more vibrant and safer neighborhood. It does put more eyes on the street in those areas that have been desolate. But if the building that is sitting there and is going to continue to sit there is desolate, and the tenants inside it, it's tantamount to abuse the way their buildings are being kept, even as they're paying the $1,400s a month in rent. That is the next step. And I hope that that Councillors Hill will look for ways to solve that, and other orders of government, should they be listening, are looking at that as well, because that really is coming, particularly in the City of Toronto, as a major trend. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Layton to speak.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And because we were talking about affordability and rent, I wanted to take the opportunity to speak to some background on why I introduced item MM 38.15. If anyone was listening to Metro Morning this morning, you heard from Carrie North, who was a tenant on College Street. She was in a building with 7 other units, and the two developers went through and quite strategically evicted all of those 8 tenants. They first did so by their right of personal use, and then when the landlord-tenant board said, how many units are you going to personally occupy, they started evicting people for major renovations. Well, it turns out the landlord-tenant board has just ruled that they don't have the right to restore the tenancies of these tenants. So let me just repeat that. They were evicted with the right of return by the landlord-tenant board, and now they're trying to reestablish their tenancy, but the LTB has admitted they don't have the power to do that because other people are living in their units. Why does it even exist? So all of the tenants in all of your buildings are potentially subject to legal renovation, because if that landlord just moves some people in right when they're done, the LTB doesn't have the right to remove them. That's why I put the motion forward. I thank Councillor Bylaw for seconding it. But I do encourage you to read the Star on this past Saturday. There was a full-page article about these residents and the lack of protections given this most recent ruling from the LTB. This needs to change. It needs to change quickly because our landlords know they can do this now, and they will start doing it more. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any further speakers on this item? Okay, on the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor Shiner, Councillor Pasternak, and Councillor Davis. Councillor McMahon, Councillor Perruzza,
The item is adopted unanimously, 35 in favor.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go back to page 3, EX 32.3, Financial Management and Control Bylaw Review and Update. Councillor Perks, we held the item down for you.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. After consulting with Councillor Davis and the Mayor's staff and the Chief Financial Officer and a number of other people who had an interest, I'd like to propose that City Council refer item EX 32.3 to the City Manager and Interim Chief Financial Officer with the request that they submit an updated financial control bylaw for consideration with the long-term financial plan. This ties those two things together so we don't wind up with one bylaw, locking in a bylaw that cements our current budget process while we're in the process of rethinking a new budget process and similarly rethinking new financial strategies. Perhaps we want to change the debt ceiling, perhaps there are other changes we wish to make. It also will give me some time to do a little bit more investigation with the city solicitor and legal staff, because I have a deep concern that if we take things that are council policy and write them into a financial control bylaw, that puts constraints on us on budget time in terms of moving changes to the budget on the floor of council. The answers I got left me with some concern that we have to be very thoughtful about how we do that. I would hate for there to be some kind of fiscal crisis in the City of Toronto, some kind of economic downturn, and to have our hands tied procedurally so we couldn't react quickly on the floor of council during a budget debate. So for those reasons, I think the prudent thing to do is to step back from this momentarily, allow city staff to continue to do the work that they're doing in the long-term financial plan, and to try to tie together the various ways we control the budget process and the financial control bylaw and our long-term financial plans so they're all moving in the same direction rather than taking the steps independently and perhaps creating a bit of a mess for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We do have a question for you. Councillor Campbell, clarification.
So just to be clear, so these bylaws, you don't want to see them implemented now by this council. Rather, you would rather see them implemented by the next council with the long-term financial plan, which may come this time next year.
Well, my preference would have been to have them all together in front of this council, but given that that's not available to me, I think this is a sound second best.
So if the next council, elected in December, decides to pierce the 15% debt ceiling, which is only a policy now, the provisions that are provided for today would not apply, and they would be permitted to do that.
So we've always been permitted to do that, and we could have, in the most recent budget debate or any previous debate, we could have done that, but that would have constituted a change in council policy. What I heard from the city solicitor is there is a little bit of uncertainty about whether that creates any kind of a risk for a group of people who pay taxes to challenge our budget in that we didn't amend a bylaw when we made the motion. So I have a series of questions. Tying the two of them together is one of them. And I also just want to better understand, are these minuscule risks? Are they more considerable risks in terms of the legal question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go.
Are there any further questions or speakers? Okay, so on the motion by Councillor Perks. On favor? Carried. Recorded vote? Okay, recorded vote. A motion by Councillor Perks.
Councillor Karygiannis, please.
Councillor Palacio, please.
Councillor Wong Tam. Councillor Perruzza, please.
Councillor Crisanti, when you're seated, please.
Councillor Davis. Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor Perruzza, thank you.
Councillor Crisanti, thank you.
The referral carries unanimously, 36 in favor.
Yeah. Okay. On page 4, AU 11.3, Councillor Ainsley, you held the item down. IT infrastructure and IT asset. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. Forget that. Sorry, Councillor Ainsley. We have to go to page 4, EX 32.21. Councillor Perks, you held the item down. Questions to staff?
I have no questions of staff.
Does anybody have any questions to staff? Yes, Councillor Hart.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. A question of the CFO. Just wondering, if we go down this road, Mr. CFO, how will you budget this?
So certainly it's a volatile form of currency, and it would be very difficult to crystallize it in monetary terms, and I think it would be best to report back on it.
Thank you.
Well, in defense of the future, we're giving them a fair amount of work already anyway.
Okay. Councillor Fragadakis.
Yes, I thank you, Madam Speaker. So just to staff, I was wondering if in your report back you're going to be speaking about the service charges that are charged with these transactions in this space, and what that would mean for taxpayers if they're paying their bills, and like the kind of impact that it would have on their bill. Because, I mean, the fluctuations in cryptocurrency are pretty drastic. And also, could you comment on, I'll let you answer the first question.
So certainly we'll look at all facets of using that as a form of currency, if you will, including, you know, risks, service charges, et cetera. We'll explore, we'll do a very large scan.
So I also understand that there's the cryptocurrency actually uses up a lot of energy, and that there's theft in this space. So I'm just wondering, I guess in the report from whoever on staff, if it's from the CFO's office or the city manager's office, will speak to the amount of energy this will require and how that is either in sync or not in sync with our energy efficiency policies?
We will spend the dollars and undertake the staff report as directed by council. But staff, I think, are very much interested in blockchain technology and are very much interested in the role of data mining and the role of Bitcoin and other currencies as information stores. And we are working with the province and municipal licensing and services and others to explore ways in which those technologies can be brought directly into city services without necessarily focusing on the currency aspect. Our preference would be to focus on those.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would I be correct in understanding that cryptocurrency is like peer-to-peer sharing of money, and in some ways it can cut the banks out of the picture? Is that an empirical enough description of what this is?
It's peer-to-peer, it's consolidation of information and building trust through a series of complicated mathematical problems, mining the answers to those problems, and developing a shared ledger associated with that does in fact remove as an intermediary the normal financial institutions.
Right, and so would I be fair to say that your examination of the item could include consultation with people like law enforcement, our regulating bodies like MLS and so on, to understand the impact of this technology on would it be, is the scope of your work that wide that you might want to think about those kinds of things?
We could, in fact, do those things, and we could look at the extent to which cryptocurrencies are a value store for areas traded in a darker share of the economy. We can look at all of those, but frankly, as I indicated earlier, we are tremendously interested in blockchain and other aspects of digital technology, and I think would prefer to focus on the application of those to the delivery of public services.
Okay, and so to go the furthest of this, I remember this actually was mentioned in the discussion of the Airbnb or the sharing economy with respect to our last set of regulations, and there was some allusion that blockchain technology, which is part of cryptocurrency, is something that can facilitate trade online, and there are some risks or concerns to the city about this type of technology being employed because we're in the business of regulating those entities, and we should be aware if there's other financial transactions that potentially could happen with any platform that's created out there right now or in the future.
Generally speaking, we operate on a cash basis. We don't even actually operate on a sophisticated accounting basis or an accrual basis or anything like that. So our actual capacity to handle complicated transactions and as the interim CFO mentioned, to actually get appropriate value, and also there are various security issues associated with the technology as well.
Is the recommendations before you give you enough breadth and flexibility in your reporting that you could bring in any other concerns that you might have along in line with some of the questioning that I had?
We can, of course, report on those things. That takes staff time. That's costly and draws it away from other work. And, of course, we would prefer, as I indicated, to focus directly in on the use of technologies for the direct enhancement of public services.
So rather than an amendment or anything, you feel that the reporting before you is broad enough that you could bring to council's attention anything that you thought was important?
I think staff are actually already actively involved with the province and with others in terms of exploring the potential application of these technologies.
Thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
I'm almost embarrassed to ask the question, but not embarrassed enough, so I'll ask it anyway. What exactly is blockchain technology, and how can the city benefit from it?
I'm not going to make an effort at explaining the technology that I don't fully understand. But what blockchain does is it uses a series of computational.
So it wasn't a bad question, then.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I think the number of people who actually truly understand the application of these, the energy requirements, the security issues, the transactional frictions, and a number of other things, it is potentially a superb way of agreeing and having a shared understanding of information and of facts. We have large shares of information and facts conducted in programs like municipal licensing and servicing. There is the potential to use blockchain or similar technologies to actually develop ledgers of shared information in databases.
So, okay.
And even that answer will be technically incorrect.
Thank you for that answer. I mean, essentially, aren't we trying to, I mean, is this another way of getting at how the city will be paid by suppliers, or how the city will be paid by residents? Or, I mean, are we looking to improve the method of payment to the city, the revenue gathering?
So I don't think staff particularly get up in the morning worrying that the Canadian dollar is not adequate for accounting our services. And if we are worried about the accounting, it's not because of the domination, the Canadian dollar value. This would be an effort to show Toronto as a modern jurisdiction. I think that's totally appropriate. I think it's also worth focusing absolutely certainly on the use of the technology to public services.
Okay, or is it not probable, or is it already occurring, that Bitcoin is also used by the underworld to launder money?
Many different aspects of our economy, casinos, other aspects are used routinely to launder or exchange money. So there's absolutely the possibility that many different stores of value can be used to undertake that. And certainly there have been a wide number of media articles speaking to the potential for Bitcoin as a largely, or other cryptocurrencies as largely anonymous technologies to hide value.
So, okay, so last question is, are you aware of other governments, either municipal, provincial, or perhaps the federal, that are going down this road and doing this kind of investigative work to see if it's suitable for their purposes?
We are certainly aware of a number of governments, and we're working with them in terms of investigating, along with Mars and others, the potential application of blockchain and other technologies as it relates to delivery of public services. I don't believe we're aware of any of them that have made an active practice of looking to replace Canadian dollars.
Panama.
Okay, well, I still have time. I'm going to ask one more question. So, just a second.
Kazakhstan.
So the question is, what do we stand to lose by not being an early adapter? Or do we stand to lose anything by being an early adapter? Or can we not just let somebody else do the work and then we'll go in after the fact and implement if it's necessary?
Toronto, through a number of key institutes, is actually already a prime leader. As an economy, we are a dominant player in the cryptocurrency world. That research is being conducted on a regular basis inside our universities, inside our financial institutions. As an economy, we are already a primary driver of that, and it is reflecting that primary driver that we're interested in applying this technology to the service of public policy directly.
Okay, thank you for the answers.
Councillor Ainsley, questions?
Oh, I'm fine. I've had them all answered.
Councillor Carroll, questions?
So briefly, it's a quick series. Did I just hear the city manager say that other governments are already looking at this?
They're looking at it in terms of their public services, to the best of my knowledge. I'm not aware, and frankly, we haven't undertaken an exhaustive search. We're quite busy, frankly. We haven't undertaken an exhaustive search.
That is where my next question was going. Am I right in understanding the general tenor of the preamble to the long-term fiscal plan and to your budget presentation earlier this year? And I dare say even the words of your deputy city manager, Mr. Livy, earlier today, that this council has a penchant for overburdening you with report writing on things that others are already doing the work on?
Our great colleague, Deputy City Manager John Livy, used the word focus, I believe.
Yes. And others are already doing the research we could avail ourselves of, but if we were to actually come back with a report and actually engage in this as a practice, we would be a total and utter outlier, would we not?
I want to be very clear. I'm not sure we would be an outlier because I haven't done that research yet. Where we would not be an outlier is working on the application of these incredibly important, very interesting, very powerful technologies to the direct delivery of public services.
But you will confirm that you are very busy right now and that there are other credible institutions already doing just that.
Yes, and we want to work with the banks and others around making sure that we use this appropriately.
Councillor Thompson, question?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I guess my question is to the City Manager. Mr. City Manager, it isn't really clear to me as to the responses that you've been given members of Council. Is this something that governments should at least have an understanding, whether or not it's municipal government, provincial or federal, because it is becoming more commonplace than not. So should governments not have an understanding of it to develop policy around this particular, whether it's blockchain or cryptocurrencies as such?
I agree entirely that
I can't hear you, sorry.
Excuse me, my apologies, I have a cold.
No, this is, people are talking, that's not you.
I agree entirely that with the premise of the question, which I understand to be that all governments, including municipal governments, should have an understanding of modern technology, including the details of cryptocurrency, and apply those as required to a public policy environment.
So I think here some of the tone of the questions that are being asked is that you and your staff have so many more important things to do that this isn't one of those important things. Would you define this as not important in terms of having a better sense of understanding of both these two specific type of matters, cryptocurrency and blockchain?
Absolutely. I need to be as clear as I can be on this. We're using blockchain and cryptocurrency as a generic here.
Right.
There are a wide variety of technologies and approaches within there. Many of them are actually central to the City of Toronto. Many of them, the geography of the City of Toronto, and in fact, Toronto is in fact one of the world leaders in that absolute research and is a core driver of that. My interest in these technologies is primarily in terms of their efficacy and their impact in improving the delivery of information and using that information to improve the delivery of public policy. I believe at least part of the motion focuses on the use of these as a way of undertaking dollar transactions and paying things like our bills. I think that is my own sense is that's a misplaced effort, and we are placing our effort where it truly belongs.
Okay, thank you very much. Through you, Madam Speaker, to the General Manager of Economic Development, Mr. Williams, is the City of Toronto currently involved with respect to funding the Blockchain Institute in Toronto?
Yes, a number of divisions have formed to work with the Blockchain Research Institute that's up at Queen's Park, Mars area.
And why is it important for us at least to either assist and or to promote Toronto as a center for blockchain as such? What's the benefits?
It's a technology that looks like it's going to have a lasting impact down the road. It's very complex, as the city manager has talked about. We already did. Municipal Licensing and Standards did a joint test pilot project with the provincial government around some licensing of restaurants. So it's a technology that we need to be aware of, and we need to research, and we need to support. And if there's an economic development benefit, all the major banks have set up blockchain research labs within their operations. So we need to understand it and leverage it where possible. And we also need to understand that there are some employment downsides to the technology, as there is with all technologies.
Right. And so the work that would be done in terms of garnering information, obviously if banks are doing it and other organizations are obviously developing and or coming forward with a process that identify how the technology could work, would it be then you would just be piggybacking on this process in order to garner information so that we here at Council would be able to have and utilize it as we see fit moving forward?
I might go a little bit farther than what you just suggested.
Sure, that's fine.
We need to understand the implications of this technology and where it could benefit the city and where the city will be pulled into it no matter what.
Right.
So we need to be, in my view, we need to be aware of it and understand it as best as possible and work with those that are at the leading edge.
So it appears to me that some people are saying this is a waste of time. Is this a waste of time?
Not from my perspective, not from an economic development perspective.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for the questions. We'll go to the speakers. Councillor Perks.
Speaker, I do have a motion that Council receive this report or receive this item. I was so hoping we didn't have to do this. I really, really hope that we could just not have this come back after I saw the notice of motion. But evidently we have to. Evidently we have to have a conversation about this. I want to be clear. There are important technologies that will grow out of the blockchain work that is being done. And yes, the University of Toronto and several Canadian banks are part of the research on that. The motion you have in front of you does something else. It says that we should look at using Bitcoin and blockchain. Bitcoin is a very, very, very different animal. Blockchain is a means by which you can transfer data in a secure way and keep a record of how that data moved. To make that work for a currency or some other particular thing you want to keep track of, you write software on top of it that can talk to all the different uses. That software that sits on top is vulnerable to exploitation. This is why some of the biggest currency scandals of the last half-decade have been associated with Bitcoin. It's not that blockchain is a problem, it's that to make it work with currency and do other things, you create all these vulnerabilities and risks. And no one in the world yet has figured out how to lock that down. It is a complete waste of city staff's time to examine the question of whether people can pay their taxes in the city of Toronto using Bitcoin. You may not have noticed, but last week it's emerged that several European organizations who are studying problems with Bitcoin have found that along with currency values, it's being used to move child porn, because it has those vulnerabilities sitting in the software on top of the secure blockchain technology. Wise person once said, a little bit of knowledge is a very dangerous thing. And unfortunately, the motion that we have written, that was written for staff here, was based on a little bit of knowledge. And the proposal to staff is a very dangerous thing. The city manager, in his remarks, I'm going to miss this, parsing what he's actually saying, but he did say three things that are worth noting. One is there is already work being done by governments to understand how to use the blockchain technology in the delivery of services, and we should continue to do that work. We've heard that that work has started without any motion from this council. Another thing he said, though, and I heard this, is it would cost a lot of money to do this work. And the third thing he said, and I was going to say it in my speech, and this is for you, John, we should really focus around here. So, can I suggest, colleagues, the good people at the University of Toronto, the good people at the major banks in the City of Toronto, public servants at the federal level, the provincial level and the municipal level are already asking the question, can blockchain be used in the delivery of public services? They don't need a bunch of us who don't know very much about it to meddle and tell them how to do it. Let's let the good people who know what they're doing do what they're doing, and let's not confuse blockchain with Bitcoin. And let's not think that we, have figured out something really exciting about a new way to transfer money. Goodness sakes, we might as well ask them to, find out if people can pay their taxes with Dutch tulips. It's just, or air miles, or Tim Hortons cards, or Canadian Tire money. It's the silliest thing in the world. Leave it alone. Let the people who know what they're doing do what they're doing. We don't need to give them any more direction. Please vote to receive this item.
Thank you. Councillor Hart to speak.
Yes, I'll be very brief, Speaker. I stand up to support Councillor Perks. I mean, there are two issues here. There's the blockchain issue, which I fully support, but there's the Bitcoin piece, which I don't think this council should support. I mean, the market valuation of cryptocurrencies have gone down by $133 billion since their all-time high. Bitcoin's gone down 7% today, 22% in a week. I mean, we can't be using this as a form of payment to the City of Toronto, certainly not at this stage. And I'll quote a couple of people. One, our DCM. I've got a quote from his speech this morning. He said, staff are sent on too many errands. And this would be one of those errands we shouldn't be sending staff on. And also quote the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett, who said that cryptocurrencies will end very badly. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Carroll.
Madam Speaker, I will be very surprised if some of the very same colleagues that I have in this chamber who continually lecture us that small government is best and that we need to narrow down our tasks and we should be who we're really meant to be, a municipal government, just paving roads and making the water come out of the taps and making sure the garbage gets picked up, and then you're done. If those very people actually think that we should be doing this. I will be very surprised, Madam Speaker, if those very people who say we should put more faith in the private sector, we should run like a business and always listen to what the private sector says, vote against receiving this motion. Because the private sector is spending a fortune researching this for us. And if you have faith in them, let them do it. You have enough to be getting on with here. We have heard that chapter and verse all year, essentially, from our city manager and chief members of his staff. They have enough to be getting on with. If you need any more evidence that we would be an outlier and we really should leave it to those who can take risk. We're supposed to be a blue chip, non-risk organization. That's why when we put a debenture out, people snap it up in a heartbeat. We're supposed to be the safe bet. And you can talk about Bitcoin paying bills, but in fact, your Bitcoin is not cash. It's a thing that goes into a market to trade, and it either has a value today or no value tomorrow. From Fortune magazine, these exchanges, which match buyers and sellers and sometimes hold traders' funds, have become magnets for fraud and mires of technological dysfunction, a Reuters examination shows, posing an underappreciated risk to anyone who trades digital coin. That's the case today. It may not be the case tomorrow, but we can afford to let the private sector get us to tomorrow. We have enough to be getting on with. And if you need any more evidence, one more place. Tonight, just do a little search on your devices and watch John Oliver on cryptocurrency. I'll shorten it for you. The gist of the 15 minutes, if you don't even have 15 minutes, is if you dwell on this at all, you're not investing, you're gambling. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Ainslie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At the Executive Committee, I supported the motion that was before us on cryptocurrency and blockchain. I actually moved the motion because a lot of the reading I've done recently about cryptocurrency revolved around cybersecurity and the risks that were inherent to it. In fact, the Governor of the Bank of Canada spoke at a speech just before Christmas. He said he was asked what kept him up awake at night, and he said it was cybersecurity, and a lot of it revolved around cryptocurrency. That was at the Executive Committee. Some more of the reading that I've been doing since then. I'm going to be supporting the motion to receive this item. Cryptocurrency, from a lot of the reading I've been doing, it's like the Wild West of the monetary exchange around the world. Most recently, Facebook, Google, Twitter have all banned any and all advertisement that has to do with cryptocurrency. I understand we have an obligation to look at blockchain. That's one thing. Bitcoin and some of the other cryptocurrencies widely fluctuate. I don't have any of my residents asking about the ability to accept paying their property taxes or any of their bills in cryptocurrency. I haven't heard anything from the staff the other way saying this is something that we need to look at. I do continue seeing comments from experts around the world about it. Mark Carney, a Canadian, and he's currently the governor in the Bank of England. Some of his comments most recently, we're going to be talking about cryptocurrency at the G20 meeting. We're talking about them now in the Bank of England. The Financial Policy Committee is looking at risks and financial stability. There are issues for authorities who deal with money laundering, terrorist financing, and price fixing. There's been a number of incidents of theft. In England, issues with cryptocurrency and fraud just over the last 3 years have gone up 400,000%. In the conclusion of the last article I read, Mark Carney said, cryptocurrency has all the hallmarks of a bubble, and normally they end with a pretty brutal reckoning, adding that the idea that Bitcoin would ever be used as a replacement mainstream currency was an impossibly high bar. So saying all that, I think that at this point in time for a municipality,
to be looking in cryptocurrency. I think there's still a large regulatory framework that has to be put in place before somebody like the City of Toronto, even our banks, can be heavily involved in cryptocurrency. And at this point, I'd ask everyone to support the motion to receive this.
Councillor de Bearmaker.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm not an early adapter. At home, I have a sack of grain. I have a couple of chickens. And I can sort of get my head... I know they're illegal, but I keep them for currency. So I can get my head around maybe allowing taxpayers to pay their taxes using some sacks of grain and some chickens. I even have some pennies at home that really aren't allowed to be around anymore, but I keep them at home and I can get my head around pennies. But when I saw this motion, I think it was Councillor Kelly that moved it earlier, I have a staff member who's 20 years old, and I asked her to explain it to me. She explained it very well, and I had no idea what she was talking about, so I thought, well, maybe, when I want something dumbed down to the simplest level, I go to Councillor Campbell. So Councillor Campbell and I have been sitting here with our iPads, Googling everything we can to dumb it down to its simplest level, and I don't know.
I don't know if that's a compliment or not.
I'm sticking with my sack of grain and my chickens. That's what, if taxpayers want to find an alternative means of paying their taxes, I'll take the chickens and the sack of grain over the Bitcoin. So I'll be supporting Councillor Perks' motion.
Okay. So we might have to hold this item down for tomorrow. It looks like there's a lot of speakers. Everybody keeps putting their name. Councillor
I'll take care of that one. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of that one. I'll take care of that.
Call it, Jimmy. Call it, Jimmy.
Madam Chair, with the famous words, "In God we trust, all others pay cash," I'm calling the question.
So question's been called. So if you have any chickens, you can vote.
Councillor Matlow, Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor Layton and Councillor Wong Tam.
Councillor Burnside, please. Councillor Cole.
Councillor Thompson.
Councillor Cressy, please. Councillor Cressy, may we have your vote, please?
Deputy Mayor, when you're seated.
Councillor Kelly was not feeling well, so he left.
The motion to end debate carries. The vote is 30-6.
Okay, on the motion by Councillor Perks, recorded vote.
Councillor Crisanti, please.
This was a very good motion.
You like that one, eh?
I loved it.
You like In God We Trust?
No, Councillor Perks' motion, not yours.
You don't like In God We Trust?
The motion to receive the item carries. The vote is 34-1.
Councillor Ajamari, you have a motion to introduce a bill.
That leave be granted to introduce Bill 296.
Shall leave be granted to introduce this bill? Recorded vote.
Councillor Holliday, please. Councillor Cressy.
Councillor Matlow, please. Councillor Perruzza, please.
Councillor Mihevc, please.
Councillor Perruzza, thank you.
The motion to introduce Bill 296 carries unanimously, 36 in favor.
Shall this bill be passed and declared as a bylaw? Recorded vote.
Councillor DiCiano.
Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor Perks.
Councillor Palacio, please.
The motion to enact the bylaw carries unanimously, 37 in favor.
Councillor Ainsley, you have a motion to introduce the confirming bill.
Yes, Madam Speaker, the leave be granted to introduce a bill to confirm to the point of the introduction of this motion the proceedings of City Council meeting number 38 on March 26, 2018.
Shall leave be granted to introduce this bill? Recorded vote. One more.
Councillor Perks, please. Councillor Matlow. Councillor Davis.
Councillor Fragedakis, please.
Councillor DiCiano, are you on the floor? The motion to introduce the confirming bill carries unanimously, 37 in favor.
Shall this bill be passed and declared as a bylaw? Recorded vote.
Councillor Cole, please.
Councillor Layton, please.
Councillor Layton, please.
The motion to enact the confirming bylaw carries unanimously, 37 in favor.
Okay, thank you. We're recessed to tomorrow at 9:30.